in our thousands, in our millions. We are all Palestinians. In our thousands, in our millions. We are all Palestinians.
Since Israel began bombing Palestine in early October, Ireland has been one of Palestine's most outspoken supporters. Ireland condemned the Hamas attack on October 7th, but as soon as 10 days later, became one of the first countries to vocally oppose Israeli retaliation and call for a ceasefire.
We believe that, like any state, Israel has the right to defend itself, has the right to go after Hamas, so that they cannot do this again. But what I'm seeing unfolding at the moment isn't just self-defense. It resembles something more approaching revenge.
Since then, Ireland has made headline after headline for their financial support of Gaza, enormous marches in support of the cause, and politicians who clearly state their solidarity with the Palestinian people.
Thank you, the Irish people, for being so vocal on the side of justice, on the side of humanity. You never fail to hear our call for freedom.
So why is it that as EU countries have struggled with mixed messaging and split allegiances throughout the conflict, Ireland has emerged as an outlier, a staunch ally to a country halfway across the world that just happens to share a tricolour flag? Ireland has been ideologically aligned with Palestine not just this month, but since the 1950s. In the early 20th century, Ireland supported the Zionist cause. As one of England's oldest colonies, many Irish resonated with the Jewish ambition to establish an ethno-state from a diasporic population, revive a dead national language, and escape from the European persecution with which they themselves were familiar. However, once Israel agreed to the United Nations' British-supported 1947 partition plan that divided up Palestine into Jewish and Arab states, Irish affinities quickly shifted. Israel's incursion into Egyptian Gaza, Sinai Peninsula, Syrian Golan Heights, and the Jordanian West Bank during the 1967 Six-Day War heightened Irish perception of Israel as a colonizing power. At this point in time, Ireland was still reckoning with the aftermath of a civil war in the early 20th century that resulted in its own partitioning. Southern Ireland successfully withdrew from the United Kingdom, becoming the Free Irish State, whereas the smaller Northern Ireland remained under British control. In the occupied North, Catholics were granted restricted civil rights compared to their Protestant neighbors, and sectarian violence crescendoed into a 30-year conflict lasting from the late 1960s to 1998, known as the Troubles. The bloody resistance resulted in more than 3,000 deaths and was characterized by guerrilla warfare and paramilitary groups, most famously the Irish Republican Army, or the IRA. The IRA believed in an armed, violent struggle with the aim of removing British forces from the island. Marked as criminal by the British government and much of the Western world, the IRA found a fast ally in the Palestinian Liberation Organization. The PLO formerly governed Gaza and was engaged both in political and violent resistance to Israeli occupation. It too has had a fraught relationship with being globally labeled as a terrorist organization. And this affinity isn't just ideological. Throughout the 1970s, not only were Palestinian freedom fighters revered by members of the IRA, but the PLO supplied the IRA with Soviet weapons and even trained with some operatives in the Middle East. Palestinian flags became proxies for tricolour Irish flags that would be mounted across Catholic Republican areas in Northern Ireland. Israeli flags could be seen being flown by Protestant Unionists. These flags are still used to denote the different sides of Irish sectarian conflict today. With a perceived shared experience of colonial oppression and controversial violent resistance, Ireland has actually always been an outlier when it comes to European views on Israel-Palestine. It was the last European nation to recognize Israel as a state, 15 years after its founding in 1963. It was the last to open an Israeli embassy in 1993. Ireland was the first European state to call for Palestinian statehood in 1980. And in 2021, it was the first EU country to formally renounce Israeli annexation of Palestinian territories. Even as the IRA eventually abandoned violence and parlayed its power into the Republican political party Sinn Féin, politicians have consistently met with Palestinian leaders regardless of global designations of terrorism. In 2009, for example, former IRA member and Sinn Féin president Gerry Adams donned a keffiyeh and met with Hamas, recognizing their election to power in Gaza. Today, as death tolls in Gaza continue to soar, Ireland has become a vocal supporter for Palestinian liberation once again.
Israel is doing what it is doing because it believes it can do so with impunity. And why wouldn't they believe it? In the 75 years since the Nakba, Israel has never been held accountable for the countless breaches of international law or for its relentless, brutal acts of oppression, annexation, apartheid or ethnic cleansing. This time it must be different. This time the world must make a stand. Sinn Féin stand with the Palestinian people.